MHO Talk Show.
Yeah, buddy. Razor.
Yes, sir.
How you feeling, good sir?
I'm feeling good, man. Like the person that we have coming in on here, Charles. Like I'm glad to have him. Right? It's just certain shows that I think is going to enlighten the community in a different aspect because of the way the conversation is going to develop. So I'm feeling good about what's going to happen in this next hour.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, man. I ain't made your family. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that. We sure do. So tell a friend, IMHO on all your social medias. IMHO Talk Show, that is. Sir Charles, Big Razor, in the booth, in the building. Man, you know, as we always do about this time, you know, Razor, we, like we say, regardless of the good or bad that's surrounding us, we got the job to do. Yeah. When these lights come on in this booth, the people expect to hear a good word, right? They you know, expect to be entertained a little bit. So, you know, definitely want to be cognizant and show respect to the loss of life that we've experienced as a city, as a community here recently over the weekend, man, between the plane crash, between the senseless violence on just last night, prayers and, you know, continued blessings to the families. And as a community, again, that is why we are here on your nonprofit radio station, community-based radio, IMHO, to have these discussions, you know, not to just talk and laugh and have fun and entertain, but to inform and to know that we are still here with each other, still here for each other. And we got people that we love to bring in here, that we love to celebrate, because these are the boots on the ground. Like, you know, we're here to sort of moderate, to sort of manage the show. But we don't act like that we know it all. You know, we'll give our humble opinions. Yeah,
you forgot one thing, Charles. What in your description that you always say,
you know it all?
Honest, of course. I'm right twice on Sundays. But honest conversation. Right, you know what I'm saying? And honest conversation means that just because I have an opinion doesn't mean that I can't be checked with facts.
Spot on.
You know what I'm saying? And that's why IMHO has lasted as long as it has.
That's right. That's right, my man. And so, you know, without further ado, you know, one of the good folks, as Razor has said, that we have in with us to help us kick off this show today is none other than the good Dr. Ben Allen of the Equity Center here in Charlottesville. Ben, man, how are you this Sunday afternoon?
Good. I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate y'all for having me this morning.
Man, as always, you know, first, you know, happy 2025 to you. Yeah. You know, 2025, yet another new year. It's new beginnings, and yet it's new challenges. But you know, but you still got your hand on the plow, man. Like, you still staying faithful to the work. We appreciate you.
Well, it's like you said, we have to. I think, you know, I was at an event yesterday, and one of the things we were talking about is, like, despite the challenges and the hurdles that we all are going to face this year and in the upcoming years, that this work is localized and that we can, as a community, still take care of our own, and as a community still continue the work. And so I appreciate y'all for giving me this space this morning, and continuing y'all for always providing space for this community to have those honest discussions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, man. Much appreciated, and much obliged as well. So, you know, like, so we're going to get into, folks, so stay tuned. You know, I'm thinking like second half of the interview, you know, the second hour where, you know, we can get into you know, the work and sort of what we're facing right now as a community on how we keep banding together and keep looking out for each other when it comes to making sure things are equitable, making sure that the spaces stay diverse, you know, and to make sure that everybody who wants to be feels included. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because that's at stake right now, you know, politically. And so for those who don't believe in voting and all that stuff, like, here's why it matters. Yeah. And so, you know, so for those that don't know, you know, Ben is the executive director over at the Equity Center here. And so first, though, the main initiative that he's in for, we want to kick it off with, is the community safety community dialogue. And you are invited Tuesday, January 28th, 5:30 to 7 at Burley Middle School over on 901 Rose Hill Drive. It will be a community member open and collaborative dialogue on safety in the Charlottesville-Albemarle region. It'll be a small group style discussion that will hold space for community members to share their input, ask questions, and engage with others around community safety. And check this out, Razor. Food, Child care, Spanish, and Dari translations will be provided.
Look,
I don't want to hear no
everything
excuses.
I need.
I don't want to hear
Everything.
no excuses for not being there. Food, child care, and a language translation.
Yeah, been doing right.
That's right. Will be provided.
Look, I have a great team that coordinates stuff like that, and I know we're going to talk about this in the second half in terms of DEI. We talk about equity.
Yeah,
that's equity.
Absolutely.
And I think people like get it real twisted.
Yeah.
When you think about it, how do people come to an event? What are the barriers for getting them to an event? So I got to take care of my child. Well, I also need to eat.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't know the language. So there's three things.
That's right.
That just breaks down the barrier so you can have a equal playing field and an equal voice.
That's right.
So we're gonna get to that later. But it's sometimes just real as simple as that.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
And this flyer is on our page, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to see there and see how you can take the survey and all this and learn more about the implementation groups and all that Ben is going to describe for us here going into it. So, man, to kick off, man, like kind of give us the background, because this community safety, community dialogue, man, again, sort of being here this morning following, another tragic incident in our community. It doesn't bring solace to families and stuff, to try to, for us to constantly say things like, well, it's never going to be like 0%, because people have those conversations. Like we only can do the work, make it as best as we can. It's never going to be 0% crime rate. Right. But that definitely doesn't bring solace to a family of a lost one. Right. So, so just kind of take us through the lead up to this idea and the need of having this community dialogue, what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that we're committed to at the Equity Center is to make sure that we have two-way communication, right? And that we're holding space for people to come and have conversations about the topics of this area. So these community dialogues, we're starting to do them once a quarter. There'll be different topics, and given some of the work that we've been involved in over the past couple of years, it's very timely, as you said, even as recent as 8 hours ago, another loss of life in our community, to be able to continue these conversations about how do we get the stakeholders in the room at the same time in order to talk about how do we prevent this. It's wild as we have these conversations with other communities, they always look at us and like, oh, you don't have a problem. You don't have a gun violence problem. But I always say, tell that to the family who's just lost their brother, their uncle, their cousin. Tell that to them. And you can't, because like you said, it's important. And this town is so small that it's so connected. So this dialogue is to really bring together service providers, community members, and to look at how do we provide holistic and timely care to individuals so that there's an alternate path for this violence, right? Like, how do we intervene and how do we ensure that people have it? And the thing that I always point out is, like, it's one thing to provide the care, but I know both of y'all are in this space. Once you provide someone support, how is it continued? Because it's not like it's going to just change in one day. It takes a while to change a mindset, to change habits, right? So how do we ensure that we're wrapping around our community members in that way? And so this dialogue is going to provide people in small group discussions. There's going to be a facilitator and a note taker each group to be able to have those conversations and have those honest conversations, to be able to look at where we're at, what's working and what's not, how we're going to get better together.
Can I, hey, Charles?
Yes, sir.
Well, as we have this conversation, I want to ask the permission of you two, as well as the family listening, for me to play villain for a little bit,
Careful.
And no, I have to, because if I don't play villain, then we won't understand the stakeholders' position for not moving forward, right? If I jump in this space real quick, it will make people have emotion and have, an outcry of like, wait a minute, what does he mean? What is he saying? As opposed to if I'm a 60, 70-year-old white man in a blue suit with a red tie. And then people are afraid to say what they really feel and then go back to their respective corners. So that being said, I want to ask, why are we so outraged with gun violence when we lose more people to drugs than we do guns? Like here in Charlottesville, I think the percentage of drug death is 1.56. For guns, it's 0.08 or 0.8 or something like that, right? It's almost half. But the outrage comes, death is death at the end of the day, right? But we have more of an outrage and a lot more tears when it comes to gun violence, as opposed to, wait a minute, hold on for Ben, because I got a point. I studied you, so I got a point here. Now, gun violence is only considered gun violence when there's a crime. But when somebody says that I'm exercising my Second Amendment to keep the community safe, that still doesn't make the person any less dead. So my two questions is, one, why do we look at gun violence the way that we do when we don't look at it as drugs? We got cops running around with Narcan, hitting people in the chest that overdose. And if I'm exercising my Second Amendment right, even if I'm in the middle of the night and it might not be the best situations, how am I in the wrong?
The first, that's an excellent question. You don't always appreciate your question.
Yeah. People say they do, but then I get the hate mail.
And then they go home and be like, really though, the first thing I'll say to that is we don't have to have selective outrage. Like we can be equally upset at both of those instances. And I think that the resources that we have in this community should be provided enough to address both the issue around substance abuse as well as the issues around gun violence. When we talk about gun violence, we talk about it as a public health issue, right? That it's not, a lot of people only have outrage when you get to the climax point of there's a shots fired or there's someone that actually is injured. But they don't understand all the activity and all the things that are happening up until that point. Sometimes it may have to do with substance abuse or drugs. Sometimes it may have to do with a lack of an outlet or a lack of mental health. All of those things are precursors to what happens when we get to gun violence. And so I think we can't just have tunnel vision and just look at that crisis point, because that's just an inflection in time that there's weeks, months prior to that there's so much things that are happening. I think also there's other thing too, just around, to kind of go down a little bit around substance abuse. I think it's a stereotype we have that substance abuse is something an individual can control, that people stereotyping and say, oh, that person can just get better and they have to have that individual responsibility. When it's gun violence, it's something that impacts the whole area because of how physical it is, of how in your face it is. And so I think we have to get and change people's mindsets that it's an issue too. And it's not just someone, can change it on their individual basis, right? There's a reason why there's a diagnosis that people get for it. And so we have to change that stipulation, that perception of it.
Okay. Yeah. And Razor, I also feel like that one gets sort of romanticized more, so to speak. I mean, it's probably not the best adjective, but it's a matter of, because Ben is spot on, but to your point, the way people respond the way that they do. Yeah. Even from my experience, I feel like that the drug use or drug abuse and death is usually, of course, there's tragic situations you never see coming. It's usually something that you've been dealing with for a while. Like you've been with this person, you've been seeing this coming, you've been trying to get them help, things like that, so it's more of a progression versus majority of the time, again, like withstanding that there's always, like ones that may happen spur of the moment, but it's like with the gun violence, that is sometimes something where it's like it happened, like what, that just happened, right? Yeah. That happened to him last night. You know what I mean? Like like you don't see it coming usually. Yeah, you follow what I'm saying? I mean, and of course, when people are in, like except for when people are living lifestyles and whatnot, of course, that you'd be like, hey man, you're gonna be dead or in jail, right? Things like that happen. Of course, that's a lead up as well. Okay. But I think people just approach the two things in a different manner, is how I would answer your question. It doesn't mean that one is more substantial than the other. I think it's just more about the way that the way that the deaths happen.
Does it make sense though for us to be able to decipher a level of outrage when it comes to, like what you said? Let's say, for instance, it has nothing to do with mental instability, has nothing to do with drugs. Let's say it's at its core of America, where gun violence, not the situation last night, because I know nothing of it, so please nobody think that we're talking about that, but in general, let's say it has, with these younger kids, it has to do with money or disrespect. Two things that we teach from the beginning of time: respect your elders, right? And get out here and make a living for yourself. Now, unfortunately, and I'm not coming against the city of Charlottesville, the government or whatnot, it seems like a lot of times they've forgotten what it's like to be a child and have things for children to do. Like once you get a position, it's like they don't understand that they have kids too that need things to do. right? You don't need to be
or you
told
just live in
to
a different
understand.
space. You live in a different space where you don't realize not everybody has access that you have.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think
yeah.
those have been our excuses, right? Because regardless if a child can speak whatever language, English or anything else, they need something to occupy their mind, especially as they're developing, different things. The easy thing has been to buy video games, buy Call of Duty, buy all these games that have reset buttons after somebody gets killed or murder or whatever, right? And then let that raise your children.
Right.
So then when that child grows up to where they're looking you in your eyes and they've developed what they feel their place in the world should be, it's hard to then cry foul when the child that you have let develop under this type of atmosphere goes out and takes that atmosphere and puts it in your atmosphere.
So I think that's a great segue to talking about the stakeholders, because you remember we had Chief Kochis in here with us not long ago, and one thing,
the city manager and stuff here too.
We had everybody.
We had everybody. So I'm just saying,
but in particular though, like what I'm saying is with the chief, one thing that he said in particular that stuck in my mind is how he compared stakeholders in community safety being like a soccer team, and he compared the police to being the goalie, and to which he said that there's a lot of players that crime goes through before it gets to the goalie, or and he said the goalie has one job, right? Is stop the ball, is stop it, right? Like that's your only job. So and he likened that to like if you break the law, then we have to impose the penalty for that, like for that crime, right?
Right.
And you can't like necessarily look at the police of like, oh, well, you should have been the therapist or you should have been this and that. They're like, that's not our job. There's other players where it's a job. So talk to us about the stakeholders that are a part of this dialogue that's happening on Tuesday, so folks know sort of the fullness of what's going on.
Yeah, and to tie it back to what Razor was getting to with I don't think it's has ever been as hard to be a kid as it is today.
Absolutely.
I think it's increased. The pressures have increasingly, I'm 40 years old, right? Like I was in high school 20 years ago. The academic pressures, the social pressures, and everything is instantly in your face all the time, right? The way that you remember, like you would go to school and people would say something, you couldn't see them until the next day.
Right.
Like now it's all on social media and everything. And so you talk about those like core values that we know with youth of like respect, how their peers influence it. It's in their face all the time. And then you kind of see everything going around your world. Like I think we sometimes live in a bubble because we didn't have access to even 24-hour news all the time. Right. But this is always on. So it is incredibly hard to be a kid these days, no matter who you are. I think the thing that we have to get to when you think of the stakeholders that'll be there with like service providers and opportunities, there is one thing. The worst thing for a kid is to have nothing to do.
That's right.
And to have nothing to do with negative influences. There are so many opportunities in this community in terms of camps, resources, the school systems, the activities that you can do, the credentials that you can get before you even come out of high school, where you don't even necessarily need a 4-year degree because you can stack credentials in cybersecurity or in computer science before you leave. You can go to the military. You can get all of that stuff. And we have to figure out a way to say, here's the resource. Here's the people that need it.
Right.
What are the barriers that are stopping our kids from taking it?
You know what I think?
Onto it.
Without cutting you off, you know what I think?
What is it?
Honest to goodness. And a lot of the things that are here in Charlottesville, the opportunities are, and everybody, please just, like I told you, I was playing the villain from this, are presented in a very white way so that the children that are out here don't feel inclusive. Now, I know coming up through school, I didn't have a black teacher. I had one my entire 12 years, right? So when you take people that are looking to help with education, but they're human beings and their understanding goes to the people that they understand. So then you have children who might come from a different background. And it's kind of confusing to these children, in my humble opinion, where the world copies what our community does. But when it comes time to give it back and give us opportunity, there's a disconnect. and these kids have to accept that, okay, this is what success looks like. This is what talking proper looks like. Like if I talk the way we talk in my community, I'm a country boy, but let's just say, for instance, if I was a hood kid, so to speak, right? And I talk this way, you're telling me that my way of talking is uneducated because it doesn't align with your 4-year institution way of speaking, which is really based off of something that's across the pond over in England.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So how is it that is it administered over here, but you drag me from my country over here, and now mine is insufficient, even though everything that you're telling me is that my community had part in the cultivation of farming, in the building of these stoplights and all these things, George Washington, everything that we talk about, right? We talk about in the blink of an eye to let me know that I'm still insufficient. If I'm myself, but I'm more accepted if I'm more you. How can I not be confused, which turns to anger? Because everybody I know, when they start being not understood, anger is the first thing that comes about. We don't need no counselors to tell us that this is basic information. And I think that, and we got people that come in here and counsel you, my boy, and I'm not talking about you, but when it comes to counselors,
you always got a disclaimer.
And when it comes to counselors, this is just another way to make money.
So that's very multi-layered and multifaceted. Can I just? I'm gonna chime in.
I'm playing villain.
I'm gonna let Ben.
You know what I'm saying?
You ain't got to excuse yourself.
I have to. You ain't the one that got to go out here and hear this stuff. You know what I'm saying? So.
Nah, but to me, man, it's like that's so multi-layered and multifaceted to where a lot of it for my people, me being a black man in America, based on what everything you just said, a lot of times it's excuses as well. Now, because here's the thing. Here's the thing is and we know how to make a good excuse. Like when we don't want to do something.
Because we go into survival.
Or when I mean you can say that, like, but I feel like sometimes we make excuse like when we don't want to take onus on something.
Name a time when black people have been in survival.
No, I feel you. I'm not like you go in a different direction with it. Like what I'm saying is that like we understand that there's white supremacy, and that's at the crux and the core of what the problem is when it comes to how we socialize and how some people feel out of place and all of that. Whether it's you getting a job or whether you're trying to sign up for Parks and Rec and you feel like somebody's looking at you wrong. Like we all get that there is a structural racism and discrimination that's in place, right? But that does not negate the fact that you still have people out here like Dr. Allen and team that are making resources available, and the resources are available, making sure that folks know that these are here. Now, once that's done, and once because remember, ignorance is bliss, Razor. And we got to start being honest with ourselves and with our people. That then once you know that something is available to you, you can keep using. Like the Karen that works in the office is an excuse to why you ain't going and getting it, but it's there, it's available.
Is there black supremacy, Dr. Allen?
Oh, there's classism for sure. I mean, we can.
No. Is there black supremacy?
In what way?
Like say on the basketball court, or out on the football field. Like, I mean, I'm playing villain here for a second, y'all. So
well, let me go back to the piece about this, because everything you mentioned in terms of how things are packaged, how they're presented to certain students, certain demographics. Yes, they are steeped in a white supremacist culture, right? That is how it is established. But he used a key word, and that's excuse, right? We're not like, we have to think about. I know we're at a place now where people are saying there is no systemic racism, right? That's really what we're battling. We know that it is because we've seen it, we've lived it. It's always going to be there. And despite how many people in this town are working against it, there's always going to be those obstacles and those people that believe you'll never be able to shift it. But when you have someone that's presenting you an opportunity, and they're presenting it to you as a person of color, and the opportunity is putting in front of you models of excellence where the people are computer scientists, where they're doctors. A lot of these programs and towns are doing it. Then that's where we have to have, how do we get the kid to take the opportunity, right? How do we get to support them? Because like what Charles said, at the end of the day, you can be mad about it. You can be like, oh, I may have to shift the way I talk or the way I dress or something like that. But you're the one that's going to lose out on it. The other, they're going to be like, look, I told you so. I told you that person was going to make it. When we mentor kids, and I talk to kids all the time, I'm like, you getting angry, I understand where you're going to see if you can find an outlet. that's just going to give them more energy, more fodder to say like, yeah, I told you he shouldn't have been in that program, or I told you he or she didn't belong. And I think that's where as a community, we have to ensure that we have every kid has an opportunity for excellence. Every kid has the support to do it, no matter what they look like and no matter where they come from. And I keep going back to like, there is enough people in this town doing this and doing it starting with kids in kindergarten, right? We just have to ensure that we're supporting them going all the way through, because the only way that we're going to do it is if we take care of our own.
Okay.
Yeah. And Razor, let's take a break and get back to more of the DEI discussion. I want to make sure that Dr. Allen closes out on his thoughts though for Tuesday.
Okay.
Like what are we missing from this dialogue? Because I don't think that you ever got to as far as like what to expect, who to expect, as far as the resources that's going to be there Tuesday. Folks know they can come and they're welcome. You got food, you got childcare, you have translators for those who may just be joining us, didn't hear that part. This Tuesday, 5:30 at Burley Middle School, the community conversation on community safety. Because you got folks that just, let's be honest, like we have a disdain, we have a distrust for whether it's UVA, whether it's police, right? The list goes on and on. It's like
black people.
Yeah, for each other. Right. So so kind of give that sales pitch, right? For Tuesday.
Yeah, why should they come?
Look, all those things are always gonna be true, but we can either stay at home and talk amongst ourselves and be upset and be frustrated, or like, to me, part of holding this space and holding these types of events is so that you can come and have that actual interaction. Whatever your frustration is, whatever your lived experience is, like you can have that space to do it in a way that's facilitated, right? There's a reason why such a conversation that's sensitive is not going to be like, hey, here's a whole group, everyone start talking. We've all been in those. It doesn't work. Right. So we do smaller breakout sessions. So people, feel encouraged to speak, because some people don't even feel like, my voice doesn't even matter. I'm not going to go and talk because I'm just going to be overshadowed. So you do that and you design it so people can see that. And so that's my sales pitch, is like, if you are frustrated, if you know something that's worked, you have ideas, you want to hear feedback, then that's where you come and have these conversations. Because if we don't, then it's all of us going to be discharged and talking amongst our own circles and cliques and being frustrated at each other without actually knowing the details and how other people speak. It's very different to talk to people online or talk to them like after you see it, as opposed to you're sitting across the table with them breaking bread.
That's right.
Spot on, man. Couldn't say it better myself. Dr. Ben Allen, that is this Tuesday at 5:30 over at Burley Middle School, the community safety community dialogue. And so we're going to take a quick break and we're going to get back and we're going to tap Mr. Allen's brain a little bit about just what we're facing right now when it comes to sort of, everything DEI and it being under threat, but how we continue the work that has been so valuable to so many in our community. So, yes, indeed, it is Sir Charles, it is Razor, it is Miss Max, it is IMHO Talk Show. Be right back, y'all. Sir Charles.
Max.
Razor.
And we are here with none other than the good Dr. Ben Allen of the Equity Center here in town. We're having a good conversation. And, before we let him go, we definitely wanted to get his take, being that he is executive director of making things equitable here in the Charlottesville area. We already talked about one more reminder for y'all, the community safety community dialogue this Tuesday. It's big. It's for everybody at Burley Middle School, 5:30. And as we said, there will be food, child care, Spanish, and Dari translations provided for the Charlottesville and Albemarle region. So, Dr. Allen, like, where do we even start, man? I guess, since you all do such good work, I think it's, I think it behooves us to just give you the floor for a second to let folks know, just give a quick overview of that office that you are head of, what it is you do, and now what the changes in our federal government look like in the face of that work.
Absolutely. So we technically run community partnerships for the University of Virginia. About 5 years ago, the Equity Center was created at the advocacy of community leaders, some university faculty and staff, to see how the university could be a better partner to the local community. And with several focus areas that was driven from a community resource, a community survey that said, hey, here are the areas that we want the university to step in and actually be a part of the solution. And so in that, going to this piece about equity, when I talk about this work, and I could talk about it across the aisle, I talk about it at a very basic level. We're looking at how do we get people housing with our affordable housing initiative. We look at college and career readiness. How do we provide youth with opportunities? On March 11th, we're collaborating with Piedmont Virginia Community College and Albemarle County Schools that invites every senior in this area from Madison, Orange, Louisa to PVCC, where they're going to have providers from the military, from local jobs, from all different types of stuff to provide that to youth opportunities, right? I don't care what you look like. I don't care where you come from. That's an opportunity, right?
Right.
The equity piece there is holding that space, right? Providing the transportation to the systems, to the school systems, making sure that they have a space for them to come to, those kind of things. All of that's equity. I think people get it twisted. We go and get in the next piece of it. We work with our partners that I know y'all talked to with for is pipelines and pathways. That's workforce development. Again, we're trying to get people into jobs that are at the University of Virginia that maybe have some barriers to people getting entry to it. A barrier is something as simple as like, I may not have a computer that I can fill out an application on. Okay, we're going to work with you. We're also, everyone wants to talk about merit. We're also going to work with you to prepare you for a job interview. We're going to work with you to update your resume so that you can be merit-based, because people have skills, they have talents, and they may just not know how to articulate it to an employer, right? Because they were never trained to. So we're providing that.
And all these things are still equity.
Right. All this is equity, right? We look at public health. I know y'all have talked to Miss Jackie Martin and some of the work that she's doing over there in Fifeville, right? Okay, I can't even get to the health system. So how did this health system come to me? So there's a mobile unit, right? On Tuesdays, they're providing services at Abundant Life Ministries where people can come get their get vaccinations, get food if they're food insecure. And so it's breaking down those barriers. That's simple as a distance that I can't get to the health system. So we're going to come to you to your community. So we talk about all these things of like, it takes people to have those relationships and then an infrastructure necessary for them to be sustainable and get timely things. And so that's the work that we lead. And I think I'll get into this later if we have time for it. There's a whole research aspect of it too, that we look at, okay, we know what the problems are because we see it. We have family members that live it.
Right.
But how do we get policymakers? How do we get stakeholders in our community to see it in a holistic way? So we have data tools worth the county and the city about here is this almost state of the region. We have the state of the region of gun violence in our community. What are the actual issues in terms of shots fired, in terms of how many homicides there's been over the past couple of years? And all that stuff is publicly available, because if you've ever tried to see, hey, what is the problem? I know they got AI and all that kind of stuff now, but it's not the same. When you go and look for all these things, it's in many different websites. It's in many different databases. The data is not clean. And so we have a team of individuals that goes and packages that so we can even talk the same language when we're saying, like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And so that's the work that we're committed to. And regardless of what happens at the federal level, that's work that we're going to continue to keep doing.
Gotcha. Now you say that, but that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Like, what are we facing when it comes to the fact of like the threat of the resources being shut down, the threat that anything that resembles anything DEI being illegal, right? Like, what are we doing to face that? And I appreciate what you said too about how DEI serves a broad range of demographics. And like, so maybe even touch on like, how do we inform people better of that? Like, what are we or what are people missing when they think that DEI is just for people of color, right? And that's or gay people, right? That's all. Is when the national conversation, that's what it seems like. Conservatives or Trumpers, like they respond as if it's a direct impact or it's a direct attack on white America.
Well, I think people look at it as like, oh, because that demographic or that group is getting something, then I'm losing something. And we all know that's not the case. It's not a zero-sum game. It doesn't work like that. And it seems to me that the only time people get upset about it is when it's something around race, right? We don't see the outrage around anything else, whether it's socioeconomics or whether it's anything else. It really seems to be the most thing that people upset is around race. And so
can I get, I just want to say, can you speak to that very specifically? Because you pointed out some things during the break that I think our listening audience needs to hear in terms of demographics, the specific service received by which group, and how that is still equity.
Yeah, absolutely. And so before I went to UVA, my training, what I went to school for, and really my passion is I'm a K-12 educator, right? So was at the high school level as well as in elementary school. And one of the things that we see around equity is around special education services, around reading services. And so if you're listening and you yourself or anyone that you know within your family community that has received services around reading or special education, that's equity. Because literally at the base of what we're saying is like, here is a class of 20 kids. there is a young person in there that cannot be successful in that class unless we give them some support. So it might be a little extra time to do things. It might be a person that comes in and works with them, whatever they have in their IEP or in their 504 plan. It might be something that they're working with their families on. All of that's equity. And then from my experience, especially working in this community, special education doesn't matter. When your kid needs special education services, it doesn't matter if they're Black. It doesn't matter if they're white. It doesn't matter if they're poor or if they're an affluent family.
Right.
That diagnosis that they have is something that needs to be supported. And so when we talk about DEI, that is equity, right? When we talk about inclusion, how do we make sure that that child and that family feels included in all the services? The one thing I'll say there is something as simple as an assembly in an elementary school. There are some students with the noise and all the different stimulation. It's a lot for them. So for them to have exclusive experience in that programming, there are things that you can put in place to do that, right? And again, that is something that is good for anyone. Doesn't matter what you look like. And so I always go to those examples to show that people that it's not what you think it is. Like it's not that deep. And it's increasingly something that I just wish people would really look at what they're upset about. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like, what are people really so upset about that they think that they're losing out on something?
I mean, can I say it? Because you're a professional and, and you got a job to protect, but they're protecting white supremacy. But, is anybody here going to disagree with that? It's like anything that challenges white supremacy, which means white male dominant society and control, that's a threat. And people will vote against their own self-interest to maintain white supremacy. But I also wanted you to touch base on like, how do we, like, where's the hope in continuing this work in the face of the threat of it being illegal?
The hope, we have to keep in mind, I think we, over the past maybe decade or so, maybe a little bit more than a decade, we've enjoyed this sort of rhetoric at the national and even state level that DEI is what we want to do. Like we have our leaders who are talking about it. We're getting services for stuff like that. But we have to look at the long history of this country, that the people that came before us that did this work, it was illegal. It was not even an opportunity. And even when I think about like, how do we teach people? One of the things I saw that came out yesterday is, when you go to basic training in the Air Force or in any armed service, they do different like trainings on different groups. In the Air Force, one of the things they cut is about the Tuskegee Airmen.
That's right. That
they took it out of the training videos for new recruits to come in. And so it is up to us, people like us, to I call it like abolitionist teaching, right? Before it was allowed, we still taught our history, right? There's enough resource out here that you can supplement whatever your child is getting in school, that you can be able to do that. There's enough groups outside of it to be able to do it. A lot of the things that we say is illegal, it's more of like the funding that comes from it. And so we have to look at diversifying our funding streams and looking at private philanthropy. And I always put the call out to the resources in this community for individuals who are very progressive or articulate that they are progressive.
That's right.
That there are funding opportunities to provide services to some of these nonprofits and to some of these individuals who are doing this work. Like that is the way that folks can help, right? And so even going back to that Tuskegee Airmen piece is the frustrating piece with that there is everyone wants to talk about merit. If you look at what the Tuskegee Airmen did, now I've been in the military for 14 years, right? And it's always merit. It's always how good you can do. They were the baddest pilots at the time.
Say so.
Not even the pilots. Think about all the support staff, the nurses, the people that provided their training, all that stuff. They were all Black too because it was segregated. They were the best at a time when the country hated them the most. And I think that's the thing, going back to the first half of this, when we're talking about excuses, like we don't get afforded excuses. We always have to be better. We always have to show that we're better.
Right.
And the thing is that we can do that, right? Because we've done it before.
So I do wonder, though, is it as simple as continuing your programming as is, kind of unchanged if you seek alternate, funding resources? Because I'm thinking the Equity Center is under the University of Virginia, right? Which is a state institution, right?
Yes.
Is it that simple? Like, is your department having conversations with the president and the powers that be to see where their mindset is as far as, continuing with the program as is? And then, one can't help but to think about the pressure that the federal government will be putting on people to, despite finding these other resources, the financial resources, the pressure they might put on them to make some changes.
Absolutely.
Which unfortunately is something that we as individuals who, we can talk all day long and we can make good sense out of stuff all day long, but how much power do we actually have, to enforce the type of things that we're advocating for? So,
and I will say to the first part of that is that, I do feel fortunate that we have senior leadership at the university that is supportive of this work, is staying the course. But at the end of the day, there's only so many things we can control.
Right.
And I always say we can continue to do this work for as long as we can under the umbrella that we're currently in. But I go back to the point is like, there's other spaces to do this work. Right. And it may be a lot harder. There may be barriers, but we're going to still continue to do it. Right now, as we look at the landscape at the federal level, it's exhausting. We're only a week in. It hasn't even gone to what that's going to look at the state. But we go back to what we were talking about offline is like, this is why elections matter. This is why state elections matter. And we have a pretty critical race coming up. And so I think people need to really, internalize and look at their local community and maybe block out the national noise, right? And look at their local community and see what kind of community do we want for ourselves. And like you said, man, at the end of the day, like I can't predict it. None of us can. We can't control it, but I think we can still continue to do the work as long as hard as we can.
And that's spot on, because Max, because I heard you say federal multiple times, but that's why we tell people your local elections matter so much, right? Because the federal sort of does what it does, but even that has its boundaries, right? And especially this federal government is looking to give states their rights. Like they're essentially trying to go pre-United States and go back to a confederacy where the states make their own decisions and fund all their own stuff. So again, that local and your state elections are just as, if not more important. Right.
That's very true.
And that also feeds Max and Reza into how we, a lot of times we talk about how we as a people have even feel duped and feel used by a particular political party. But to Ben's point, like, that's why it's so important for us to realize that, there's like, we are in a commonwealth, right? Taxes serve a purpose and all that good stuff. So there's public services that we should be able to take advantage of. But like that man just said, we at some point, we got to be ready to be independent too. It's right. You know, and like whether that's reform to different laws or regulating certain things or whatever the case is, it's like just because you can get, just because there's good services they get federally or state provided for us, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be preparing ourselves independently. That doesn't mean our community shouldn't have locally owned businesses. You know what I mean? All that stuff. So and also what Ben said, like, I think that's a dinner table conversation. Like we just got to get more serious about teaching things that we can't expect the school systems to teach.
You know, Charles, it's much more than a dinner table conversation, because it's an ideology, it's a belief system, if you will. And while more and more of our minority population are more informed and more motivated to organize and more understanding of how things are, institutions are structured or designed to work against them, they are just as much as lackadaisical about doing anything about it. It is much easier to figure out how to tread these waters and how to survive than it is to organize and make some change.
Facts.
And so that's the difficult part out of it. Quite honestly.
But how many times are we gonna get beat over the head or killed by police or be threatened by white supremacy, like to take our well-being away before we get serious about that?
That's a scary answer.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. And I don't mean to sound like dismal and not be optimistic about it, but I'm also being a realist, and I understand, we see how much work is being done. And this guy here is talking about some great work that he and his organization is doing. But as wonderful as all of that is, it takes the boots on the ground. It takes your community members. It takes, it takes all of us to really organize against all of this. And that's the part that is missing, and we'll talk about it on the radio, and we'll talk about it, at work, or you talk about it in our homes, but sometimes it doesn't go much further than just talking about it. In most cases, it doesn't go much further than just talking about it. Yeah. And I just say that to say that we need to get to work. Like, you can't, as bad as things seem with this, or look like they're going to get with this new administration and how it's going to impact us and those that we care about, the only hope that you can really have is in what you and those around you, your allies, can do. That's the only hope that you really, really have. You can't look to the federal government and things like that to ensure your own, safety, security, destiny, prosperity, all those different things. You have to get to work for yourself.
Well said. Well said. Well, Dr. Allen, thank you, good sir. Please keep up the great work. And just, as we let you go, just any last words, any closing reminders for the listeners?
No, I appreciate y'all for having me this morning. Again, Tuesday on January 28th from 5:30 to 7, we'll be having that community dialogue. And then to the second piece of this, I hope folks were listening to what Ms. Max was saying in terms of there's some realism to this. I'm an optimist that I think that there's some strength here that we have locally that we can continue this work. I think that hopefully there's some individuals that won't be as passive and that we can continue this together, because I don't know, there's only certain things that we can control, but I think that if we continue to take care of our own, we continue to the work that we're doing, regardless of what the title of the organization is. I think we have to do that. And I think people have to have some individual responsibility in this, but I appreciate y'all really for having me and talking about these two important topics. And hopefully be back soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Take care.